This shows you tantric in meditation, and a lot of what I'm talking about is internalized in the individual. So even the sexual metaphors, etc., can actually really be seen as part of an ascetic tradition on the one hand, and a tradition of ritual sort of coupled practice on the other. This tantric is turning it all inward towards a kind of a esoteric meditational understanding of this philosophy. Now, the aspect of Tantra that relies on visual diagrams is actually calling these diagrams the yantra. That's why you have the term yantra over there. And references to yantra in literature and textual literature go back to around the 1st century or even the 1st century BCE. And we don't have many references before that because things are lost. But in documents of the 1st century BCE, even in Buddhism, we receive some of the earliest records of the yantra as a kind of a diagram that is to be sort of drawn out on the ground, sometimes just using rice paste. That's what this person is doing. And then contemplated, because each sort of line and each sort of element of that diagram has apparently magical power. Now these practices go on to this day, and that's what you're seeing over here. A tantric is essentially guiding a novice in yantra practice. Now, yantric diagrams, as I said, are of a variety of kinds, and they relate to specific kinds of possible experiences. They relate to certain parts of the body because, as I said, these are embodied experiences, and to the release of ecstatic or liberative experiences or of power around those parts and connected with those particular sort of aspects of human existence. That's why you had those specific lotuses or flowers in that diagram, and here we find one of them. I'm not going to go into the esoterics of each one of these, but you see the nature. This is a traditional tantric diagram. Now, what you see around it, this enclosure is actually a temple. If you look at it from the top, would look like this. This would be the enclosure, and these would be the stairs leading up to the main sort of temple entrance. And then from above, you'd see a tower that kind of goes down. And the tower is in tiers, and these are the tiers, and the whole thing looks like an inverted lotus. So you can almost look at this whole thing as a three-dimensional form being seen from the top. Now these kind of abstractions of the lotus go into a variety of forms, and we find very imaginative sort of diagrams that sometimes are extremely kind of provocative to, sort of help one, stop thinking, in a sense. And so very early, the notion of the yantric diagram or tantric diagram as being not representational comes into the discourse. In other words, all that I told you about specific specific forms, geometric triangles and squares, circles, etc., is a kind of a significance that is being given, which is talked about, that's part of the discourse, that is representational. But at the same time, you're being told that you don't need to know all this. In other words, you ought not to be thinking about what is the significance of this form, that it is purely optical. In other words, it's the optical impact that is going to generate its effects. So we find the whole idea is that these diagrams are coming to one in or through meditation or as a result of experiences of meditation and of these inner conditions or states, of altered states of consciousness. And then these are sort of expressed or projected by the person who is doing them. These are similar ones. Each one is a different kind of diagram. This diagram actually should be sort of flipped by 90 degrees clockwise, because this set of intersecting triangles are actually the most famous of the yantric designs. It's called the Shri Chakra. And basically, these are upward or ascending and descending triangles, and a whole series of them forming what one might call a mountain. And the upward ones are related to the male principle of Shiva, and the downward ones are related to the female principle, the receptive principle, or Kali. This one is just a single triangle, and depending on how it would be placed, it would either be the Kali sort of, or the female receptacle, or it would be the sort of upward pointing male sort of, linga. Now, these diagrams that I'm showing you all sort of belong to the time period from the 17th to the 19th century. These are traditional yantras. And when you look at the one that Tom's got up on the wall over here, they're also from the 18th to the 20th century. They're sort of, of the last 3 centuries or so. But they are very, very inventive. Some of them are one of a kind. They're not that they're kind of repeated in many, many sort of, times. And some of them are very unique, and some of them are standardized. This is one of those more unique ones, and it actually shows you, it's almost like one might think of it almost like a kind of a progression in a kind of a sequence of mitosis, or one of those kind of cell division kind of processes. And really it is about what happens when the kind of, sort of union of the sort of spirit with some other principle takes place, or of the individual Atman with the spirit takes place. They're kind of trying to describe the inner processes or dynamics of spiritual experience. And this also is a traditional one, and it's talking about the whole universe as an egg, which is, by the power of its inner gestation, its self-concentration, as it were, generating heat. And that heat is actually causing these swirls in the cosmic waters to take place. The whole universe is seen as a kind of a egg, a golden egg, Hiranyagarbha, which is sort of, in internal sort of generating the heat of concentration. This is, in a sense, the same thing that we saw in the previous picture in a more stylized flat form. And you find that, the kind of colors, the dimensions, and the sort of various elements are all representations of that particular kind of process. But again, it's reduced to a very simplified, abstract, formal contemplation device.